Welcome to Life by Design, episode 310. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, my mother from a different brother from a different mother, Dr. Cratio Judd.
I actually want you to try to explain that first one, how we got to that.
How we got to being a mother from a different brother?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, have you ever seen that movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Twins?
Yeah. Or whatever the one where he's pregnant.
Oh, what's that one called?
I forget what it's called.
I know that one exists. No, I've never seen that one.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's how it happened, Cratio.
Perfect. That makes perfect biological sense.
Yes. We are creators of Life by Design with 20 plus certified locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice. Today's episode of Life by Design, we're talking about breakfast. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Is it good for you? Is it bad for you? Should you eat it? A lot of questions there, Cratio. I guess we'll start up with this. Do you eat breakfast?
Everyone eats breakfast. You know, like it's
Do you
funny.
eat breakfast in the morning?
No, I typically do not. I tend to fast a little bit longer, but eventually I break my fast.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's two things at play here. Number one is this idea somehow that we're supposed to wake up and eat first thing in the morning versus eating at all, which is the title of breakfast, right? Like it's called breaking a fast.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's a good place to start, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting, because we've all grown up with this thought that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and it got ingrained in us. And I'm sure there was lots of marketing, and I'm gonna guess a lot of the cereal companies were involved in this marketing and helping, establish that first meal of the day, breakfast, get your day started off right. Of course, I'm not exactly sure how sugary corn pops or whatever the other cereal of the day is going to help you get your energy and the day started off right. It's essentially
Right.
the opposite, but nonetheless, good marketing. And so it really kind of sparked the question, is eating breakfast in the morning good for you? And specifically the question for today is, does it help us lose weight? And so I think for lots of years, even when I was in university back in the 90s, when I was studying exercise physiology, there's research there to talk about breakfast, and we should all eat breakfast, and it helps you, not eat binge eating throughout the rest of the day. And then you see other research, like more recent research, that says really doesn't make a difference. And I think it's what we've talked about over and over and over again. What really makes a difference when it all comes down to it is to some degree the amount of food you eat, but really the quality of food you eat.
Yeah.
And how that food gets essentially consumed throughout the day, whether it be breakfast, not breakfast. Personally, I've gone back and forth. And for most of my life, I ate breakfast in the morning, and then have played with fasting here and there. I just recently fasted again for maybe the last 4 months. And the first time I did it, I didn't really love it. And so I thought I'd give it another shot. And I did it again. And I just kept getting to the point where I didn't love the way it made me feel. I had recent blood work done again, and
Yep.
still had me concerned in a couple different areas. So just this week, I actually started eating breakfast again in the morning.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. I never think in those terms. I always think of what would be the best for me. And my goal when it comes to eating breakfast is always to try to mimic, what our physiology is used to. Our physiology and the way that we learned eating is, physiologically at least, we didn't, sit down to eat dinner at 6 o'clock or to eat lunch at 12 o'clock or to eat breakfast at 9 o'clock.
Right.
It was varied when we ate. So our bodies are, essentially have adapted to the point where we don't need to eat on a specific schedule. We should be able to miss a meal or two, or to eat a little bit more at a certain meal. So that's essentially how I try to eat.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. It's one of those things we were talking in the pre-show. How long of a podcast is this going to be, and what is the benefit to the people who are listening in? And I think that you really hit the point, which is I don't think there's one set best way to do things in terms of when to consume food and how to consume food. Now, the type of foods to eat, I think that we've established over and over again that there is a best quality of food, but how you get that food is going to be different based on your day-to-day routines, your other stressors, what time you get up in the morning, what time you go to bed at night.
Yeah.
So I just think that putting it down to, okay, everybody needs to fast or everybody needs to eat breakfast, neither of those is probably correct. I think this is where you're going to have to do some testing with yourself and figure out what's going to work best for you. So in the study that we're looking at here, Cratio, they were looking at.
Can I just add?
Sure.
Can I just add something to that? Because I think it's really important that we kind of missed the important point. You don't need to eat in the morning. You're choosing to eat in the morning, which is a lot different than waking up and having like this burning desire, like you're starving, unless you put some type of food into your diet. And this is something that we talked about in the pre-show as well. I'm not crazy about the fact that there's, in general, we're getting like, if we were to look at what the industry standard or the government standard is for nutrition, it's too carbohydrate heavy. So, I mean, if you're consuming, and this is going to come down to the weight loss and the research, so I'm kind of pre-framing the conversation here, but if your diet is too carbohydrate heavy, you're going to want to eat more, simply by the way that it affects most people's physiology and insulin.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that when it goes back to carbohydrates specifically, it's important that we note that it's not like we're vilifying carbohydrates as a blanket statement, because I think that, especially when people think
good
of
point.
by design, they often think of lower carb. And we've repeated this over and over again, that it's not so much low carb, it's carbohydrate appropriateness. And the appropriateness of it really depends on a lot of different factors. It depends on, your current carbohydrate metabolism and how well that works. It depends on your genetic heritage. It depends on your activity output and your caloric output. Carbohydrates themselves, especially whole food sources of carbohydrates, don't need to be vilified. They're not the cause of fat gain and diabetes. And I think that's an important concept. If someone were to, and there are cultures that do this, that eat, 80% carbohydrates, they eat 80%, sweet potatoes or other types of roots and tubers. And those whole food sources affect the body in a very different way than processed versions of carbohydrate and sugars and simple sugars and those types of things. And so eating whole food sources of carbohydrates are not necessarily going to cause massive weight gain and diabetes. But if you went through a bunch of different years where you were consuming a lot of processed carbohydrate, or you didn't have good carbohydrate metabolism already, yes, then reducing your carbohydrate intake could very well help reverse diabetes in a type 2 situation for sure, could help reduce body fat stores. And so I think that's where people make this leap where they go, all right, well, if I take in less carbohydrate, I'm going to lose weight and my blood sugar is going to get better. That means carbohydrates must be bad. And so to apply this to the concept today for breakfast, eating whole food sources are not necessarily bad. And I think a lot of people could do fine with eating a certain amount of whole food source of carbohydrate. The problem is that's not really how we're starting our day. We're starting our day, like I said, with Pop-Tarts and Fruit Loops, and even if it's, say, oatmeal, like a whole food source of carbohydrate, it's usually a Quaker oatmeal packaged with 30, 40 grams of sugar that's dumped into it. That's a very, very different nutritional source than the sources of carbohydrate we're talking about.
Well, I start my day with coffee, regardless of whether I'm going to eat or not. So,
for what it's worth, important nutrient of the day.
Of course, there is a coffee nutrient, and we need to consume it. But yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. And the study that we looked at was from BMJ, and what they were looking at was, does eating breakfast in the morning, and it's unfortunate that they only broke down the data in terms of calories. Again, we're going back to this numbers equation versus actually looking at the quality of calories that people consumed, how much was coming from carbohydrates, how much from fat, how much from protein. And what they found was that it doesn't matter, whether a person eats breakfast or not. It didn't seem to have that much of an effect. People who ate breakfast tend to eat a little bit more. I think they were 260 calories more per day on average than those who didn't. And they weighed a pound more on average. So it doesn't seem to have any effect on weight loss. And again, I believe, and I think there's enough evidence to suspect that they were looking at the wrong data. Calories are important. They're just not the most important based on everything that we've been talking about.
So what do you think would be the right data or better data to measure in that instance, Cratio?
Macronutrient intake. I think if we're gonna leverage how good people are doing with breakfast, and we're gonna just blanket pick a whole bunch of random people and
Right.
ask them what they're eating, I think we need to look at, and I think we need to get them to track their macronutrients and then plot, protein, fat, carbohydrates versus weight and body fat percentage and insulin level. I think that would be a good measuring point.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and that goes back to a lot of the applications that we've used with Eat by Design as it pertains specifically to breakfast. Looking at what's your protein content, what's your fat content versus your carbohydrate content, and I do think, again, we'd have to see the research, but I do think that could yield some really important and interesting, at least, data. And I think back to you take, say, Charles Poliquin talked a lot about the meat and nut breakfast, and there's other
Yep.
different people within the industry always talked about a fat and protein breakfast for many reasons, right? Brain function early in the day, carbohydrates in more of a post-workout, pre-workout window, not necessarily in the 5 minutes after like we used to think, but
Yep.
partitioning our macronutrients so they're being utilized. It's almost like leveraging them to their unique ability in that sense. And I think, yes, if we looked at the macronutrient breakdown versus just the total calories or whether we're eating breakfast or not in the morning, I think we'd probably get much better data that way.
It's funny. I'm listening to you talking. I think a lot of people, and I'm saying this from some experience because I used to think this way. It's funny how we've labeled certain foods. This is a breakfast food, and
Hmm.
and we need to eat breakfast, and it's just so funny. I mean, I don't think I know that the food industry, when it comes to it, has done just an absolutely brilliant job of
Totally.
putting a stamp in our mind about how certain things should work. And like, even when data presents itself, that's pretty clear that it doesn't work that way. We still think of it in those terms.
Yeah, I think you're right. You think of just, especially the more we are involved in, say, marketing from our consulting side of our company and helping other entrepreneurs, market their businesses and grow their businesses, and you start to recognize the value in creating a proprietary process and proprietary language and brand positioning and how valuable that is in the consumer's mind. And that's really what these companies have done is, isolated it down to 3 meals in a day. And then you identify each meal has specific food sources that fit in that meal. And then all the marketing and the communication to the consumer is tied around that. And I mean, it really is, it's a wonderful way to target in on a specific avatar, to target it on specific people in that market, and then get them in front of the right offer. It's actually, when you go back and reverse engineer it, it's fantastic marketing, but it doesn't necessarily support what is correct clinically. And this is where the dissidence starts to come up, right? As people want a certain result, they follow the rules they think are set in place, and the blueprint that they feel like either the government or what they see on TV has provided for them, and they can't figure out why they're not getting results. And then they just start doing super weird things to get results. The newest fad, of course, that's why you have all these late night infomercials that are essentially playing on people's desire to get a result that they haven't been able to get, to develop themselves into the person and the body that they've always wanted to but never been able to. And really, and this is the whole point of the podcast and where we'll take it to end this, is the blueprint is really quite simple. And if someone say, what would be the fastest way, irregardless of whether it's the easiest to keep up or not, what's the fastest way to lose body fat? Probably the fastest way is to hone in on your protein intake, eat a bunch of vegetables along with it, add in the appropriate amount of fat, the minimal amount, I guess, you would need calorically in order to still be able to have, healthy body functions, and try and repeat that day in and day out for an extended time with some strength training. If you were to do that, that would be the recipe. And that's not necessarily the easiest to keep up with. So there's other psychological factors, and there's other ways to implement these. But if someone wanted the quickest fix, that's the quickest fix. In fact, Horatio, I know from, reading interviews and, looking at lots of different cases, if somebody needs to really get prepped, let's say for a photo shoot or a movie, this is exactly what they do. They strength train, they eat a ton of protein and vegetables and basic fats, and they don't eat a lot of other junk. And they repeat that until they get to the point that they want.
Yeah, it sounds simple, and that's because it is simple.
It is.
You know, 100%. The challenge isn't the knowledge and what to do. I mean, look, it's
Right.
2019. You can go on your phone. This isn't a secret anymore. It's the behavior around the food. I think
That's right.
that's where the big leverage is, right? And just from experience, changing my own diet and my own struggles, it's the really, if, you know, unless you fix your relationship with your food, this
Yep.
is never going to be a long-term thing for you. You're always going to go in and out of dieting and exercising,
Right.
and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just the reality of it.
Well, the relationship with your food and the relationship with yourself. You know,
Of course.
we've covered self-esteem numerous times on the podcast, and there's a reason. And you know, we've said many times before, if you want to lose 10 pounds, then you need to become the type of person that would lose 10 pounds. It's not just having the data, it's becoming the person who would be able to carry that data into a repeated application. And that's really where the rubber hits the road. And that's really when the results come to fruition. So guys, check out the show notes. You can see more about the article. You can also check out the 30-day challenge. It's free. Go do it. Everybody who does it has a lot of great feedback and huge outcomes for them that they love. And also check out the free ebook, Eat by Design. You can download it at lifebydesign.com/podcast. Find today's episode. And thank you so much for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.